Okay.
Okay, good
Says we're
evening,
live. So
everybody.
hello.
How are you, Tracy? I'm so glad you are here with us tonight. We have Tracy. I
I'm
know,
doing well, thank
Tracy,
you.
you always tell me how to pronounce your name, and I still can never pronounce it, and I know it's so easy. But Tracy was a guest this last spring, and I tell her she blew me away with the information that she had. And I wanted to bring her back because I feel here's this wonderful lady who went through this experience, and she's come back. She's going to share more information with us, and I think, and I pray and hope everybody gets a real blessing from listening to what she has to share today. It's an opportunity that we all have to I think the reason why we were bringing you back, if I remember right, so correct me if I'm wrong, that this was the time of the year. I think that you said that, oh, I just realized. This was the time of the year when they were supposed to be bringing the bill back up in Congress. But right now, it doesn't
No,
look
that
like
wasn't a
anything.
conversation with me.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
I thought it was you.
I'm not sure why you invited me specifically, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, were you not the You were not the one that whose baby
Mm-mm.
was born. Okay, it was somebody else. Well, when I find who that is, I gotta ask if that bill ever got brought because right now, with no speaker in the house, all right, erase that. So I still, Tracy's here. She's got wonderful information to teach us and share with us. Um, Resources. You share the resources, right? And
Yes.
I want I want her to able to share more of those all that information because the more we learn and the more knowledge we get on these different types of things, the it makes it easier for not only for us, but what we learn from you, what resources we learn from you. If it's not for us, we can take it and use it to help someone else. So I'm giving Tracy the floor. She can speak. I will be here, but I am going to mute myself because, as I've said in the past, that's the only way I can discipline myself to keep my mouth quiet and just listen. And the floor is yours. Thank you for
All
being here.
right. You're welcome. Thanks, Dee, for having me back. As Dee said, I was on the podcast back in the spring, and I was allowed to come on here and share about my survival as a survivor of suicide loss. And so I am the CEO of my social enterprise called Journey Through Grief. And I also, well, let me back up a little bit. So after I was on the podcast in the spring, we had some big changes here at the company. And so I actually relocated our headquarters from Washington State down to Springfield, Missouri. And so within that move, I am now able to, you know, have more contact with about 7 or 8 more states than just the Washington, Idaho, Oregon segment. Now, I have not dissolved any of that, so I'm still, representing my company up there, but now we're down here as well. So I'm a little tired, but that's okay. And so, in moving down here to Missouri, um, I did a lot of soul searching, and I did a lot of evaluation of what we had been doing over the past 4 years. And we had some messaging that was kind of confusing about what we did. So I ended up kind of splitting those two. And so Journey Through Grief works directly with loss survivors of suicide loss with coaching and resources and our podcast. And then I created another company called Postvention Collective. And the reason that I've named it that is because I had also mentioned back in the spring when I was on that I was getting ready to go to Portland to speak at the American Association of Suicidology's conference. and I was talking about my 4 phases of suicide loss. And in doing that presentation, I had people in the room who were students that were going to become new therapists and counselors, and I had, um, practicing therapists and counselors, whole realm, whole wide range of people. And I started asking about postvention, and the predominantly the response was they didn't know what postvention was, which was alarming to me because postvention is the care of our loss survivors after a suicide. And those people are the ones that should know this because they're the ones doing the therapy for the loss survivors, as well as people with suicidal ideation. So, that started kind of a wave of about 2 months of different presentations that I did, different exposures that I had to various people. And I was told that they didn't know what postvention was. And I thought, well, if I'm going to speak about loss related to suicide, postvention needs to be in the name, because what I found happen is people will then say, well, what is postvention? And I get to explain what it is. So I'm getting my messaging across just in that way. So again, we came down to Missouri, and I decided to open a second company that works directly with these concepts of postvention and how do we support loss survivors, and how do we, interact with loss survivors. What should we say? What should we not say? Because loss survivors, they're lost in their grief. They've just had this devastating event happen, and they're expected by society to go out and interact with people at work, people, their friends, their family. After a while, it's assumed that we should just be better and not be affected anymore, that we just move on. And so, I want to educate people that that isn't how it works. We don't just move on 2 weeks later, 6 months later, a year later. I've met survivors who it's 20, 30 years later and it's still affecting them. It's not affecting them, hopefully, in the same way that it affected them right after the loss, but they've still changed into totally different people than they were when the loss happened. So, this means that we have more resources coming out as far as training opportunities for that education. We also, I've been trying for like 6 months now to get our YouTube channel up and running. Every time I get started, I get pulled some other direction, but it's important, and I will get that done. So, yeah, just a lot going on with, the coaching. I found an organization that also does coaching for suicide loss. And there's a group of coaches within that. And so I've teamed up with them, and I want to give them, better training on what to expect with a loss when they, come across someone who's gone through that. I'm trying to think what else we have going on. But it's just, it's just so important to recognize that loss survivors, again, they're a totally different person than they used to be. I know for myself, I lost my daughter in 2006. So we're coming up on the 17th anniversary, which just is amazing to me because that means she's been gone longer than she was alive. She passed away when she was 16. So when I get to December, it's going to be a little surreal for me at that point. But I can tap right back into what that loss was like, that right when it happened, throughout that next week, throughout that next year. Fortunately, I had some very good friends and loved ones that were there to support me through it. I also had friends and family that walked away from me during that time. I don't know why. Again, I haven't reached out to them and haven't had a conversation. Over time, when I talk to other people and I hear those same kind of stories, I've come to realize I think it's because of fear. I think we have people who are scared to interact with loss survivors because they don't know what to say, or they know they should say something, but it might be wrong and they upset them. And, I think we don't, get up in the morning and look to upset people, but it can happen if you don't understand the demographic of people that you're interacting with. So, that first week of losing Chelsea was devastating. In fact, I probably only remember maybe 5 to 10% of that week. I've had other people come back to me and say, "Oh, do you remember doing this? And do you remember we had this conversation?" I'm like, "I don't. I really don't," because I was in such a self-survival mode that I was totally oblivious to what was going on around me unless it was something that had to be done, like funeral services or memorial services, things like that. But day to day, I did not remember, anything that had happened at that time. And so over the course of the past 17 years, um, it's been a journey, and it's a hard journey
Because your
for
brain was
all
numb.
loss survivors.
Your brain
Right.
was numb.
Well, I was in a fog. Hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we call it a fog,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
I tell people. In fact, I did a
Now I
presentation
sort of
last
I
week.
sort of remember Tracy like, yeah, I remember Tracy in a way when my son passed away. Um, Certain things I do remember and certain things I don't. That sometimes my sister say, "No, don't you remember we did this or that?" And it's that my sister doesn't realize that when you lose a child like that, well, I mean, my son didn't die the way your daughter died, but still, when you lose a child, it's still that numbness,
It's a
the brain numbness.
disconnection in your brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So here's the new thing that was fascinating. So I went to a conference last month in Nashville, and there was a speaker there called Dr. Amen. And this isn't a plug for Dr. Amen, but he was talking about brain scans, and he has a new coaching program. So I enrolled, and I'm going to do that coaching program because I want to see, or I want to learn, what does our brain do in the midst of this this grief, this intense sudden grief, right? What is our brain doing chemically, and how does that feed into that brain fog? Because I would love to be able to then coach or educate people about, here's what happens and here's why. I always tell everybody I couldn't find my keys. I was forever finding my keys in the freezer. And so I'd kind of like to know why that was my way of, how my brain fog manifested itself. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's just so much to learn about how grief impacts us biologically as well as emotionally. So yeah, I'm busy with
It's
learning that, and I'm busy with getting new clients and branching out into different parts of the United States.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about Dr. Amen, and he's really good. Another person that's really good that you might have heard Tony talk about was, oh, I hate when my brain just does this. David, his name is David. Anyway, who's another good grief educator and again teaching people more about how to be a good grief coach. But
I think your video kind of froze up there. So,
oh, I hope not.
but yeah, I mean that devastation was really, it changed me. There's things that I used to like to do just for fun that don't even interest me anymore. I'd like to think maybe I learned some new things I didn't used to do. Um, but yeah, you're a whole new person, and you're trying to explain to others why that is while you're still trying to understand it yourself, of why you've become this different person. It affects everything from your other relationships to your parenting relationships with any other children that you have. Um, it affects. Um, I totally lost the word that I was thinking of, but like your marriage or your, significant others that you're um, connected to. It can affect that. There's lots. There's a high rate of divorce. There's a high rate of just relationships that dissolve because of this type of loss. And I think it's so prevalent out in the country, well, worldwide, right? Um, it's the average, it's 135 people affected by one loss. And so if you look at your local communities or you look at your your state and you find out how many people passed away from suicide that year, and you multiply that by the 135, we have a lot of people out there that are going through some form of grief related to that loss. And there's
And people
and
don't
certainly there's
realize how
many.
much.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah, yeah,
obviously lots of tragedy going on in the world, right? But this is just one more on top of that we don't talk about, and we don't. I would like to think that some of it is just ignorance, that people don't know that suicide loss is a major, um, demographic.
and it changes you. People don't realize how much losing a child really changes you emotionally, mentally, and even physically.
Right, and there's the
You
added
know.
component of how that child died. Because there's a organization called Compassionate Friends, and they work
Yes.
with parents who have lost a child to any circumstance. And I went
Mm,
to a few of their support groups, over the years too.
yeah.
But how a parent is affected by someone, or is affected by their child dying by cancer, is different than how a parent is affected if they've lost someone to suicide or accident or homicide. And you're right. I mean, it's just it really, as a mother, it really gets to the core, I believe, of your being, to have that relationship
Right.
majorly altered. And I don't remember how you said that your son had passed away.
Yeah, because although we're not really supposed to compare the, okay, I know that we're
Right.
not supposed to compare the different losses of anybody. Um, the devastation is still there that any parent can tell you. I mean, I understand when someone loses their child from a tragedy compared to someone from a long illness, because with the long illness, we deal with anticipatory grief, but with the tragedy like suicide, you don't have that anticipatory grief. You don't have that time to spend with them, you know, hoping and praying
Hmm.
that a cure is found before then. And then when there isn't, then of course you're a little angry that that cure is not found. But still, I, I've always been taught never compare um, losses. But to me, I would have to agree. My son was I dealt with anticipatory grief, but I have to agree. Any parent that lost their child through a tragedy, whether it's like suicide or a car accident or something like that, I would find that to be extremely overwhelming of that kind of a loss. That would, for me, it would have taken me way over.
Well, I know for myself. I mean, I fell into self survival mode, and it was just enough to get out of bed and go to work, and that pretty much wiped out my whole emotional
Mm-hmm.
you know capacity for the whole day, and my energy level was constantly drained 24/7. And then we would assume I was sleeping, but I wasn't. um, and so I didn't parent well my other child. Over time now I've come to regret that, but it's like this. basic need for survival at the time. What do I have to do to get through this? And everything else around me just, you know, just like having blinders on and not being able to go beyond here. Uh, so there's lots of apologies I've had to make over the last 15 years or so. And, the consensus has been, well, you just went through this horrible thing. Of course you weren't acting in your right mind. But, again, it's about educating communities that this is what a suicide loss survivor is going through. So when they're acting, with this strange behavior that's not like them, it would be so great if we had people out in the community that went, oh, I know why you're acting like that, because you just lost someone to suicide, and that totally makes sense. How can I help you? How can I support you?
Mm.
Um, I just interviewed for a series that's coming up next month with a coach up in Canada, and we're talking about healing conversations after loss. And, I went on there to say, we need to not be afraid to talk to people when they ask us questions after the loss. And I'm not saying, that this is an instant ability or anything like that. But, we have people that come up and say, well, how come you didn't see this coming? Or, why weren't you able to help your child? Things like that. And, it's okay to come back and say, I don't want to talk about it. Or thank you for asking, but I'm not comfortable having this conversation right now. I think we're required to answer questions when people, throw questions at us. And that's not the case. We don't have to be rude, right? We can be polite and just emphatically say, I'm not in a place where I can talk about this. Because I've heard loss survivors say, well, I can't go to my family's homes.
You better be honest and upfront.
Yeah, honest and upfront about what you need. And if they can't respect that, that's a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't make you a bad person by putting out what you need.
Yeah. But I do have one question, because you just brought something about the holidays. So I understand how that had been difficult for you for the holidays for you. But how was it for the sibling?
Okay, so Chelsea died the 2nd of December. And at that point, the life just stopped still for me. So I personally had no need to celebrate Christmas that year. I didn't send out any cards. I didn't put out any invitations. Interestingly, nobody sent me any Christmas cards either. So, I'm guessing that they figured they didn't want to bother me or upset me by receiving a card. My son, from the onset of finding out that his sister had died, he threw himself into doing anything that was normal. So it was like he put himself in situations that would be normal behavior so that he could, not think about what had just happened. So like the morning that he found out that his sister had died, initially, he was upset and he was crying and that. Once he calmed down a little bit, he wanted to go to the mall. And I said, he's like, Mom, can you just drive me down to the mall? And I said, well, this didn't compute for me, right? So I said, well, are you sure that you really want to go to the mall? And he said, well, yeah, I told, so-and-so that I'd be going to the mall today because I needed to pick her up a shirt or whatever it was. And I said, okay. And he said, Mom, I just need to go to the mall. Okay. Because, that age, he was 17. That's what they did. They all hung out at the mall back in the day. And so, I took him down to the mall, and he did, he took his friend with him. So he wasn't alone going around the mall. But he just threw himself into, again, things that would seem normal. So as far as Christmas goes, he went to his dad's house because his dad actually put up a tree that year. So he had kind of some semblance of normal as far as, as best he could as far as the holidays went. Outside of that, though, he ended up spiraling with alcohol and drugs and had quite a problem for the next, you know, 10 to 15 years because he was, escaping and he didn't want to deal with his
Yeah,
sister's
he was trying
loss
to
and that
numb the
tragedy.
pain.
He was trying to numb the
You
pain,
know,
yeah.
yeah,
And
and
interesting,
he was
if we
trying to
talk
hide
about
it from you.
Christmas, yeah, he was. And, when we talk about Christmas, it was probably about 5 years before I could put a tree up and actually decorate it because every year it'd get a little better. Like the first year, I brought the tree out and put it right back. And then the next year we got it out and I was able to get lights on it. And that's as far as I got. I couldn't bring myself to pull the ornaments out and put the usual ornaments on the tree. And then the year after that, my mother-in-law was living with us and she said, "Well, can I decorate the tree?" I'm like, "Yes, please, go ahead." She said, "Well, I don't want to, step on your toes or anything." I'm like, "No, no, no. Really, it's okay. Go ahead and decorate the tree. I don't need to." And then the year after that, I was actually able to start pulling out the old tree ornaments, because they had little ornaments that they had made in grade school, and so they were sentimental and whatnot. I was finally able to pull those
Hmm.
out and slowly, you know, put them up there. But it's a process, right? I
So
mean, I tell people
baby
that,
steps.
how you, yeah, baby steps. How you get through this is how you get through this. I mean, there's no standard way to get through this grief other than to be able to find the
So
resources when you need them.
yeah, so in a sense, it was a blessing in disguise that she was there to sort of help, get that started for you. So even though she did it one year,
Hmm.
that sort of probably maybe put a seed inside you for next year, for the next year, you know, which you did. I think you said the year after that you
Right.
did a little bit more. So it was a blessing in disguise in a way. So, so with the
Yeah.
with this new class that you started, we're helping these students learn and understand more about how to, or how parents, I'm trying to find the right word to use, to cope much better or have a better understanding how their coping skills is different from people. Because I'm trying to find the right way to say this. Because, like I said earlier, we're not supposed to compare losses. But for some reason, losing a child is like really devastating compared to losing other relatives. But our coping skills from losing a child from other relatives, all it does varies, and it even varies even how siblings deal with it as well, because I mean, is it compassion funds or the grief recovery teaches us how siblings that lose a sibling is almost in a sense like a mother or parents losing their child. So, like you were saying, it took your son a while before he started hiding his pain. And in a lot of cases, from when I've talked to a lot of other grief coaches and all that, we've all come to the same conclusion that most people who become alcoholics or drug addicts or whatever is because that's their resource or that's their source to numb that pain or to freeze it because they don't really want to deal with it. And they don't want to deal with it because, in a lot of sense, they were never taught how to deal with it, how to properly deal with it. And like, they didn't go to therapy or they didn't have a friend or friends to talk to,
Right.
or they really didn't come to their parents and talk to, if they would have had, or even like guidance counseling, at school, somebody to talk to. And it's like boys or men seem to hide it much better than women. Not to say women don't, but they do have a better, for some reason, they hide it better. And it comes to the point that towards that end, it makes it more difficult for them to have to learn the coping skills. They end up having to go to rehab so many times, and, and it's just, all we have to do is talk about it. Just talk about it and, you know, say their names, say their names, talk about their memories, and how did that sibling's death really affect you? So, with your son, was he afraid to find those resources? Because if you were in your depths of pain and grief, and I'm sure you probably went through depression as well,
Oh,
did
sure.
maybe his father help him with it?
No, his father was actually worse off than he was.
Oh,
So his dad hasn't really worked through any of it in the past 16 to 17 years. So if anything, my son had a benefit of being related to me because I was right in there saying, "Hey, is what's going on now?" I can't make him talk to me. So most of the time it
mhm.
was kind of a one-sided conversation, but I at least let him know that there were resources and whatnot. But he, he, like I said, he had the drug and alcohol problem, and there was a lot of guilt there with him because of the relationship they had had. He wasn't the nicest to her sometimes, and I think now this person is gone, and there's that guilt of, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been so mean, maybe I should have been nicer to her. And so a lot of unresolved conversations, right? So he's had to deal with that, all the stuff he can't take back, all the stuff that he wish he would have said while she was here. um, Fortunately, though, about 2.5 years ago, he got off the drugs, he got off the alcohol, he got a legitimate job, um, and he's been going to work, every day like he should, um, for the past couple of years now. So I'm really proud of him in that respect. But I still think there's a lot of emotional stuff there that he just hasn't dealt with, and I would say, that he's just kind of repressed it and tucked it over here, and he's over here just doing life. And but yeah, I think a lot of these things aren't going to change, unless we have a cultural shift that says men are allowed to be vulnerable, and men are allowed to talk about these things, and men are allowed to ask for help. um, because right now we still have that sense of hierarchy, that men are in charge and they can't be weak. And they're human, though. So these are emotions that I
Exactly.
would like to think they can get out and get help for eventually, because it affects an
Yeah, because
unprocessed loss will affect all aspects of your life, be it work, be it relationships, be it love interests, all of it.
unfortunately we live in a society that even even for us women, before men, you're taught, men don't cry, big boys don't cry, pull up your big pants and deal with it, or we don't want to hear about it. It's like, but God created our feelings for a reason. He created our tears for a reason. He wanted us to know that it's okay to be angry. it's even okay to be angry at him. He understands, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But society wants us to learn how to grieve in their way and not the way we should be taught how to grieve. You know, so
Yeah.
it's really hard because I think God created us women more to be more emotional and to understand it better than men. You know, that's why He created us women, so we can help
Right.
you men.
I think we have a
you
higher
know,
level of compassion in there as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have a little bit more. I'm not saying men don't have it because I'm more than sure they do, but for some reason we seem to have a little bit more empathy. We seem to show more sympathy. Like you said, we show more compassion. We show more kindness. You know, and I
Well,
guess
I think
that's
we
why.
were created to be nurturers. And so, with being
Yes,
nurturers, we want to fix and
yes.
repair everybody. But it's really difficult when we're, you know,
Even if we can't, but
messed up ourselves. Yeah. When we're dealing with our own stuff, it's kind of
yeah,
hard to be
yeah.
there for others sometimes. But, last week I actually did a presentation for a group of students who are graduating with their masters in psychology and they're going into crisis response, type of professions. And the professor had me come in and talk about suicide loss. And it wasn't even specific. I mean, I told my story, but it wasn't specific to suicide loss for of a child. It was suicide loss in general, because whether you lose your spouse or you lose your child or you lose your sibling, um, there seems to be like a list of things that happen after that type of loss. People, like my son, feeling guilty of the relationship that he had with his sister. Maybe you have spouses who just had this horrific fight and then this happened. And so, we need to, when we see someone that has just gone through a suicide loss, be prepared to know that that person is dealing with guilt, they're dealing with anger, they're dealing with confusion and the brain fog, which makes them somewhat non-functional on a normal level. Um, and some of these things, like you said, with the anticipatory grief, you work through a lot of that stuff. Um, that it's coming, and
Hmm.
maybe how you'll process it. But with suicide loss,
Hmm.
it's traumatic, and especially if it was some type of violent act happened in the process. um, Even with like suicide homicide combinations, right? um, you're dealing with whether it's your friend, your coworker, if they have had a suicide loss, you've got a person that's dealing with all these feelings they don't know what to do with because they're coming at them all at one time, but they're trying to function normally in their day-to-day life,
Yeah.
and it's just really not possible.
Hmm.
And so, again, I think
Hmm.
the statements that come out from people that hurt the feelings of a lost survivor is all because people aren't educated on, don't say, oh, they're in a better place. Don't say, oh, you'll just get over this, give it time. Those don't apply. Those platitudes do not apply to the situation, and all you really do is hurt that person who's grieving. So, I my
Hmm.
opinion is, be there to listen. You're not required to interject if you're just there to listen. Um, but if you have to interject,
Hmm.
something simple as, I'm here for you. I'm here to listen to whatever you need to
Yeah.
say is helpful.
Because presence, even if you don't know what to say or what to do, your presence says a lot.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's your action speaks louder than words. Just being there. Um, Dr. Norman Wright um, writes in his book, um, What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say, is that he was sharing a story of a man with his wife that had passed away. And this pastor went to go visit the man. And or he said that guy sat at one end of the sofa and he sat at the other end of the sofa for 30 minutes or more. Not one of them said one word. And then suddenly the guy goes, I'm hungry. You want pizza? And then from there on, that started the conversation, because then he discusses how important that presence also when you're there more often during that time, and even if you don't do or say anything, but just being present, then they start to sort of like pick up that trust. Maybe I can trust this person and talk to them, and maybe talking to them will help me understand something. And this man began to trust his pastor a little bit more. And during their pizza supper, they started having that conversation. So it's presence says a lot, a lot. Um, if you never read this book, it's a great book to have. I teach my class how to be an effective comforter from this book from Dr. Wright. And
What was it called again?
what to say when you don't know what to say.
Okay.
It's by Dr. G. Norman Wright, H. Norman Wright. And he's written many, many, many books. And he used to teach grief at the university in California. But I think he's retired now. It's about time. And he just got married for the fourth time. So, but he talks a lot about he lost his son, he lost his wife, his first wife, and he talks about the different things that hearing the conversation he heard his daughter speaking. So, but he's a licensed psychologist who also does grief share, and he shares a lot of how important of knowing what to say, and he even gives you the different tips of what to properly say and what not to say, what to properly do and what not to do. But the main key thing that I always, because I read that book over and over, and the thing that gets to me that I really impresses upon me so much is he says, presence has a lot to do with it. And it's like just salute the presence, because that's what's going to help that griever to start trusting you by just being there. Whether you're holding their hand, whether you gave them a kiss, whether just listening to them, or just letting them cry when they need to cry. I mean, he gives you so many good tips to help you through that to become. And this is why I call my class How to Become an Effective Comforter, because he teaches you to be that effective comforter. And
We tend to, as a human being, we tend to just want to fix it.
yes.
Right. So we find somebody that's grieving, they're obviously hurting. We're compassionate people. We want to fix it for them. And this is a situation that we can't fix. All you can do is, like you said, be present. Something else that one of the students asked me after I got done last week, she said, for herself specifically, she's anticipating being in a crisis response situation where a loss survivor could come in because, this just happened. And she might only have one opportunity to work with that person. And so what should she say to that person or, do with that person if she has like a one and done opportunity to, counsel them or help them? And I said, the thing with suicide loss survivors is they have to feel safe. If they don't feel safe, they aren't going to share. And, you need to, again, just be there as a sounding board for that person to, say whatever it is that they're going through or whatever they're feeling. And it may not even sound rational, but what they're feeling is what they're feeling. They need to be able to get that out. But you have to let them know that that it's a safe place for them to be.
Mm-hmm.
to be most effective. Aside, from that, I said, know your resources in the town that you are working in so that you can, share those effective resources with that person before you just, send them out in the world and hope they do okay. So, hopefully that presentation, it went about 90
And
minutes.
we all,
Hopefully it'll be helpful as they go out in their careers,
did you
because
find
that
it?
was the whole point of doing it.
Do you know by any chance was that class that you did that presentation was recorded?
No, it wasn't. No, it was just kind of an
Oh,
impromptu. I had been at a vendor table at a suicide prevention walk the week before, and I met this
okay.
professor because she came to the walk, and she said, I teach this class of crisis, intervention students, and maybe you should come in one night because she'll bring different people in, to touch on different topics that she thinks is pertinent to what they may experience, out in the real
Mhm.
world. And she said, do you mind coming in? And I said, yeah, just let me know. And then the next week she said, can you come tomorrow? So there really wasn't time to work out any, long logistical thing. But
Whoa!
yeah, but it was good. It was good. I
But she was
really,
lucky to find you at that time.
yes, yes. And, I like to think that, God put me in the right place at the right time so that I would be able to give, there's probably about 18 students in there, and hopefully they were able to take something away that they can use at some point.
And she may ask you to come again,
Oh, she
you
did.
know? For
She was walking me out, and I said, let me know if you
me,
need anything else. You want me to come back? And she said, next semester. And I said, okay, let me know, let me know when that is. I don't know when that is. So yeah, I
that's
mean, that was back
wonderful.
in the spring. Like I said, back in the spring when I, encountered that room full of students and psychologists that had no clue what postvention was. I said, okay, this is part of my new mission is to educate what that is. So this was like a dream come true to get in there with these students before they go out in the real world and they come across somebody who's lost, a person to suicide. Now they'll at least hopefully, be able to tap into something in the back of their head that, oh yeah, that lady came to my class and told us about this.
Well,
That's my
what the
goal.
funny thing is, I think the reason why that so many we as parents, these grief coaches, is because a lot of times we cannot find a grief therapist. I remember when
Right.
I was at a meeting at a Compassionate Friends, and I remember hearing one or two mothers they could not find a grief therapist. And I mean, they went to see a therapist, but the therapist had no clue what
Hmm.
these mothers were going through. Piece of paper that said she was a licensed therapist, but she had no experience of understanding how to help people with grief. And that's what inspired me to be a grief coach and go through all the training and all. And that's where the sad part is that we have all these wonderful therapists out there, but none of them know how to help people get through grief. When I was going through therapy after Timothy passed away, none of them understood how to help. In fact, I I think I knew more how to help them to be a therapist, a grief therapist,
You
than they
probably
knew
did.
how to help me, because of
Yeah.
my training, but yet they couldn't help me. Now they were able to help me with my other underlying issues,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
they could not have helped me through my grief and all. And that's
It
my,
honestly starts up at the college level. It really does. Because after I
yeah.
went through both my bachelor's and my master's programs, there was no talk of suicide in any of my psychology classes. And, you know, when I was up in Washington, once you graduated and you wanted to actually go and practice out in the field, you have to do so many thousands of hours underneath a licensed therapist so you can get signed off on and whatnot. Well, then I started thinking, well, if that licensed therapist has never been trained, they're not going to train the person that just graduated and came out of school. So when are these people ever learning? Right. And I hear the same thing that, you said, where I've had loss survivors say, I couldn't find a therapist. Then I finally found a therapist. And then this therapist only has 2 hours a month available to see me, but I got in. And then as soon as I told them about my loss due to suicide, the therapist didn't know what to do. So now you have frustrated loss survivors because they went through all these hoops to even get into therapy. And then they're not getting any help, which is why I then, also
Yes.
turn to coaching, because
Yes.
we need all the different resources that we can get to help people, whether it's, therapy or coaching or, bring it all on. Right. But, oh yeah. A lot of work needs to be done up at the college level to, and again, it's all back to that conversation that we're not comfortable about talking about grief and loss and suicide.
And also, so so that's like the 4 year, but then you got to also think the people who are also getting their masters, who's not getting that training, or those who may be getting their PhD and still not getting that training. So
now see, I cannot speak to the
more
PhD
difficult.
folks. Yeah, I can't speak to the PhDs. I can't speak to the PhDs. Maybe there's some PhD programs out there, but they're few and far between if there are. And even like continuing education after you've got your license, Washington State only requires like 10 hours every 6 years. And the field changes so much, in 6 years. And
oh yes,
people just assume, oh, I'm never going to be exposed to somebody that is dealing with suicide, or I'm only going to practice with marriage and family therapy, or something like that. But what do you do then if you're in a marriage and family therapy situation and a couple comes in and the reason they're fighting is because their son just died from suicide 6 months ago? Well, now you are exposed to a suicide loss situation. So we can't, the therapy community cannot assume they're not going to be exposed to it. Because it's all over. It's 135 people.
And especially in this day and age.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, it all comes down to talking about it more. Bringing it into the mainstream conversations. Not being afraid to say, yeah,
and I think that was one of the reasons why when Tony, I think that's why it's important as we as grief educators to be able to not only educate parents and help parents, but there's teachers, there's employers, there's doctors, there's nurses, there's, again, licensed therapists, clinical social workers and all, that they assume that because what they were brought up, that's what they know, but they don't realize there's more to it than just that little bit that they know,
Right.
And it's sad that
unfortunately some people don't know about it until it's happened to them. And I wouldn't wish this type of grief on anybody in order to learn about it. No.
Yeah, not upon your worst enemy. So the other thing is I had to teach my cousin. I have aunts that are twins and they're identical. And my one cousin kept saying that his mother has dementia. And I have experience in helping and working with people with dementia. But I also know that dementia or symptoms like dementia mimics grief. So if you don't understand grief, you're not going to realize. So, I mean, I keep hearing, so my cousin kept saying, my mom has dementia. And I'm like, John, your mother doesn't have dementia. Your mother is grieving. She just lost her home. She just lost her car. Her sister is very sick in the hospital. She's afraid she's she's dealing with the anticipatory grief. So she doesn't have dementia. I had explained to him that it mimics it, but it doesn't mean she has it. Well, took her and had her all that test done.
Right.
Because he was trying to prove that she had dementia. And all the tests came back that she didn't. And I said, you see, it's grief. Grief mimics dementia. She doesn't have dementia. I said, no, I work with people with dementia. I've worked with people with dementia for years, and she didn't have dementia. I put my point, and I said, you guys need to learn to trust what I'm telling you, because I have many years of experience of actually literally working with people with dementia. But I also have experience of actually literally working with people with grief. Mm-hmm. So, and
well, it's that whole brain fog thing. And it's however our brain is processing to that brain fog.
Yeah. Yeah. She was just grieving, then her sister died. My other aunt died. So now she's in really that grief mode, because these two have been together all their lives. And now suddenly,
well, there's that whole twin connection, right? I mean, don't they say that the bond is stronger when you're a twin?
And it's like they're yes, those two are like peas in a pod. Nothing like me and my sister. My sister and I are two different opposite people. You would never, the only reason why people know we're twins because we look alike. And I just keep telling them I'm the prettier one. That's all. And then,
That's
yeah.
That's great.
But otherwise, if we're not together, if we're like only on the telephone, we get along just fine. But if we're in the same room, it's like cats and dogs, So,
yeah.
And she's another one I had to teach about grief and dementia, because she thinks she knows it all and she doesn't. So, and I know I still have a lot to learn, but I'm just saying I know a little bit more than she does about it. But it's just, that's the facts of life, and I'm just thankful that we're coming to it, that we're coming to the point that, Jesus is coming soon, and we're going to be reunited with our loved ones again. And I look forward when I can be reunited with my Aunt Blanca.
Definitely.
And my mother and my grandparents and my son and all. So that great and wonderful day is coming. Well, Tracy, again, as always, I thank you so much for being part of us. So share with us, how can people get in touch with you if they need to? Your Facebook, your website.
So again, I have journeythroughgrief.com. That's THRU for through. If you want to get on the mailing list for any of the trainings coming up for suicide loss, related grief, postventioncollective.com is the other new website. But yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Tracy Oerse at LinkedIn. I'd love to meet anybody that just wants to chat about grief or learn more about what suicide loss looks like, or just, some pointers on how to talk to survivors like myself so that we can, heal as many people as possible. And, as always, I enjoy coming on here and talking to you because I learn a lot.
I learn more from you, but I always enjoy talking with you because you bring out the best of me. Also, I want to have one other question to ask you. So I know with the way we're dealing with mental health nowadays, especially with a lot of people that is also unfortunately and sadly committing this act. Is there ways we as the general who may have friends or family that may be in this situation that we can do to help? I mean, other than calling the is it 988, the suicide line
Mhm.
and stuff like that? Because you know,
Well, there's different trainings, that people can do. There's QPR. QPR is probably the low level training, which I want to say it's a couple hours, that you would learn about signs to look for, things to say. Um, that pushes, to know your resources in town. So if someone comes to you and they're in trouble, besides 988, who might be available as a resource in their area. There's another training called Assist. That's actually a 2-day training, and it's very intense. There's role play in there on how to respond to someone who's in a suicidal crisis. Um, as far as just day to day, you're trying to support your friend or your family member as they're struggling, even if it's with grief. um, like we already touched on, just sit and let them talk, sit and let them vent about what they're feeling. But yeah, 988, I mean, they originally started pushing 988 as a replacement for the 10-digit suicide prevention number. But in
800
reality,
of them.
nine,
Yeah,
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 but 988 is more than that. It's more than just, you know, someone in suicidal crisis and you call that number. You don't have to be in suicidal crisis. You don't have to be with someone who's in suicidal crisis. You can just be, having a bad day and your stressors are out of control, or, you don't know how to cope. Call 988 because you have people trained on the other end. There's been a lot of miscommunication, a lot of bad messaging out there that if you call 988, somebody's going to come take you and lock you up, and that's not the case. Um, so I highly recommend 988, and you can, once you call it, you can press 1 if you're a veteran, and that takes you right to veteran services so that they can support. um, yeah,
the VA.
988,
Yeah,
SAMHSA and the government's put in, I don't know how many billions of dollars into that program over the last year to get it right. So that's what I would recommend is, know your resources, maybe take some additional, just, layman type of training so that you're, a little more prepared, know your resources. 988. So I hope that answers your question.
do you have any of your classes that are coming? Well, no, it sort of does. But do you have any of your classes that are coming up? Because with the holidays coming up, some of us might run into loved ones or friends that may be in that crisis.
Right. I should have some webinars
Is
coming
there a
out
way for
right
some
before
of
the
us to get that
holidays.
training?
Again, get on postventioncollective.com and, put your name on the mailing list so that they're coming. Or, keep checking back on there because as trainings are released, the links, will be on there for that. But yeah, the holidays are tough, you know, as we deal with grief and try to, you know, push through it without too much trauma, right? Um, but yeah, we're
Right.
releasing trainings really soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Tracy. Um, I'm
Well,
going to
thanks,
try
Dee.
and
I
sign
appreciate
up
it.
myself. I am I did get my certification as a mental health coach, especially for crisis, So,
Mhm.
but I'd be really interested to know more about what you teach and how I can implement with what the other training I got. So,
Great.
um,
We'd love to have you.
and I think I'm going to try and encourage others to get on with you right away too, because with the holidays coming up and There are a lot of everything that's going on, including the wars in Ukraine, now in Israel, and even the Palestinians. You know, they're
Mhm. Yeah, we're getting ready to see a lot more, tragedy and grief support needed through all those losses as well. So one day at a time, my friend.
yes, that's what it is, baby steps.
Yes.
So I don't think there were any questions that came up. So other than the one I
Alrighty.
saw yours, so I want to again thank you for being here, and we have to do this again in the spring because I think it is really
Definitely.
important to keep people up, up to up on this because I think sometimes we all need constant reminders, even for ourselves, you know. So not just to be able to help others, but maybe even for ourselves. So I want to thank you for being part of here, and I want to
Yes.
thank everybody for being part of the Unplugged Grief Ministry podcast. And
Thank you so
at the
much.
end, just go ahead. My mind went blank. Just click on subscribe or your notifications, or you can reach me at unpluggedgrief at gmail.com. You can also visit my website at unpluggedgrief.org and visit us on Facebook at Unplugged Grief Coaching and Consultants. Um, I don't have a Twitter. I just Twitter Instagram, I think I still have, but Twitter, I'm staying away from for some reason, and it's too confusing for me. There's too many
Sure.
social media, and I'm trying to limit myself here. But I do want to invite you to be part of it. Next week, I believe we have Mike Gershon come. He is so funny. He's another guy who's a grief coach, but he's a stand-up comedian
Mm.
and he is so funny, and I really enjoy having a conversation with him, and he really shares a lot of his personal stories. He was he never knew his mother. He was a month old, and his parents were in a car accident, killed his mother, and he broke every bone in his little body, and he survived. That little baby survived, and now he's Mike, the stand-up comedian, grief coach. So, and we all need laughter. Laughter is the best medicine for all of us to get through, especially through the holidays. It's just for many, it's going to be difficult, but it doesn't hurt to have that little smile and to let people give you that little laugh because sometimes that's all we need to get ourselves up and get ourselves going, even when we don't feel like it. And I can vouch there have been days I just don't feel like it. And I had to tell myself, get up and get out, get up and get out, because that's the only way you can get yourself to feeling better, get up and get out. So get out of the house, do a walk, go for a walk. If I had a bike, I would go bicycling, but I don't have a bike. And I would love to go bicycling again. I miss bicycling. I miss hiking, but the only reason why I don't do it so much is because of the back pain, and it hurts to
Mm.
walk a lot. So I have to limit myself. But there are times I can do it, and there are times I just can't. I just don't know why. So I just tell my body, don't do that to me, you know? So So, Tracy, I hope also you have a good holidays. And
You
after the
as well.
holidays, I would love to book you again to have you come back in the spring and get this thing going, get everybody out, and because we all can be someone's angel. We
Yes.
all can be someone's angel, and we can be someone's light because sometimes we are people are so in the dark of their depression, their grief, or whatever, and all they need is that one little light, and that might be you. That might be you as that angel that's lighting up their room for them. So
You're
thank you
correct.
again for being part of the Unplugged Grief Ministries, and we see you next Friday. And you all have a good weekend.
Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye. It doesn't want to end. It wants to keep going. Seriously, I've pressed this thing 100 times and it won't stop.
Well, I'll go ahead and leave the studio and we'll talk soon.
Have a good night and have a good
You too.
weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.